Yes, John, I got your question. And actually, John, for John Brockman, who is in the chat, who asked me a very late patron question, you actually asked me two questions this time, John. Maybe you forgot you asked the first one, and I asked you in a comment on this on the post, and also when you tweeted at me about it just now. Which one do you want me to answer? And you did not get back to me before the start of the show, which is a rule I just made up that you have to do. And I am therefore making an executive decision, and I'm only going to answer the second question that you asked, not the first one. So you're just going to have to wait, and maybe you'll never find out where I think the Republicans fall on the fascism scale from Franco to Hitler. Because I'm not answering that. I'm answering the second one. So anyway, hello everybody John and everybody else who is watching. Thank you for joining me for another Ask Away live stream. Hello to everybody in the live chat. As always, thank you so much for being here with me. If you have questions, and I see people asking questions in the live chat already, if you have questions for me in the live chat, hold on to them. Do not ask your questions yet, because I always answer questions that were pre-submitted by Patreon patrons first. So please hold on to your questions, and especially if you are planning on donating a super chat, please hold on to that until I get through the patron questions, because I don't regularly check the chat while I'm answering the patron questions, and I will miss your question, and I will miss your super chat, and whatever else you say in the live chat that you want me to. This is from Neo-Normie, physically a T600, and the question is, second attempt, was the challenge of the GoBots ahead of the game with its gay character and both male and female robots and humans? And should there be a live-action movie/TV series of the 80s show, as it was pretty utopian in the world it was set in? I just barely remember Challenge of the GoBots. I am aware of its existence, and I think I watched it at the time when it was on, and I know I had some of the GoBots toys, but other than that, I remember nothing about it. So I can't say if it was more progressive or if it was significant that it had a gay character or, male and female characters. I honestly do not remember anything about GoBots other than the fact that their version of Optimus Prime was a fighter jet named Leader One. And I think there was another heroic character named Scooter or something who was a scooter. And that's it. So I'm sorry I can't answer your GoBots related question. The next question from a patron is from the Bourgeois Bohemian. Would Star Trek Insurrection be considered one of the best Trek movies, other than, in yours and my opinion, that it is a good outing, if it had been given a different treatment along the lines of Thor Ragnarok? I mean, maybe, but you're essentially asking, would it be better regarded if it were a totally different movie? Perhaps, yes. A lot of people didn't care for Insurrection. I did, and as you care for it as well, apparently, and it will be the subject of the next Trek Actually video. But yeah, I guess you could say if it were a completely different movie with a completely different tone, it might be a much better liked film. I think I could see where you're coming from. Like if they had leaned into the humor a little bit more. I mean, there is a lot of humor in Star Trek Insurrection, but maybe if they had just fully embraced it and embraced the silliness and said, let's just, throw, like, all bets are off, let's just go for it. Maybe it would have been better received. Yeah, perhaps. I think also it might have been better received, and this is a point I'm probably going to touch on in more detail in the video. It may also have been better received if it had not been the follow-up to Star Trek First Contact, which was the most successful TNG era Star Trek film, and one of the most successful of all the Star Trek films, at least up until the J.J. Abrams reboots, which blew all the old box office records out of the water. But First Contact was a very popular, very successful film, and it was a relatively serious, dark, sort of action-oriented movie, and Insurrection was a complete change of pace from that. So I think maybe a lot of people that went into it expecting something else like First Contact were put off by the fact that it was just such a major tonal shift from that. So that could be a problem too. But yes, if it were more like Thor Ragnarok, meaning if it were a completely different movie, would more people have liked it? Yeah, probably. Next question is from Villa Lade. Since Star Trek seems to inspire various kinds of online rage, has there been any substantial aggro about Star Trek's ambivalence regarding the moralities of rebellion, insurrection, terrorism? TNG's High Ground is an early example, but of course the splendid complexities in DS9 about the Bajoran insurrection and their late splinter groups and their Cardassian counterparts, the Maquis and the Bell riots, are prime examples. I am not familiar with any major factions of the Star Trek fan base that have a big problem with its treatment of terrorism and its attempt to show terrorism in a more complex light. You know, I like as you mentioned on Deep Space Nine, like Kira refers to herself as having been a terrorist numerous times without an ounce of shame or regret. She says, we did what we had to do. We were terrorists, but we were an occupied country, and we did what we had to do to drive the Cardassians away. And yes, some of what we had to do was brutal, but we had to do it. And, you know, she feels some weight from it. She's not completely without a conscience, but she, is not ashamed of it. And her actions as a terrorist are not condemned by the show. Like, she is still viewed as a heroic character. And I don't know of too many people in the fan base who have a huge problem with that, at least not that I've seen. Now, it could be there, and I'm just not aware of it. I don't know. But from what I've been able to tell, no, that's not something that that a major faction within the fan base has a problem with. And in fact, quite the opposite. That nuanced, complex portrayal of a very, very touchy subject is something that continues to be one of the aspects of the Deep Space Nine version of Star Trek that people really, really single out for appreciation. Even now in our post 9/11 world, the fact that they were able to present terrorism with such intelligence and such complexity is something that a lot of people point to as a point of pride, not something that they're upset about. But yeah, maybe there are some Trekkies who really don't like it, but I'm not familiar with any. Next question is from Dr. Babylon. Steve, it's Pride Month, so I've decided to share a themed anecdote. In high school, I was a very outspoken libertarian, and I enjoyed debating my liberal Democrat classmate Daniel. Like me, he had Asperger's, was intelligent, and highly opinionated. Despite our disagreements, I didn't hate him and hoped one day we'd go from frenemies to true friends. That all changed thanks to a conversation about LGBT rights, an area where I thought Daniel and I were on the same page since he promoted himself as an ally. Back during high school, I believed that people's sexuality, gender identity was a choice. I'm bisexual, but back in high school, I didn't really understand what bisexuality was. I'd only ever pursued relationships with women, so I considered myself someone who had chosen to be straight. I also knew that my big brother, who's also bisexual and didn't know Daniel, didn't understand how I could believe people chose to be gay and still believe in marriage equality and anti-discrimination. He would pull up articles and talk about all the horrible things that happen to gay people in this country and around the world. Then would ask me, why would anyone choose to be gay? Because it's their choice. One of the articles Daniel showed me described homosexuality as cultivated by maternal neglect. I was baffled by the fact that Daniel took this seriously. I asked Daniel point blank if he'd still support gay rights if he believed gay people could choose to be straight, and said he didn't know. I asked him this question several more times over the next few weeks, but he was more interested in showing me evidence proving me wrong. Eventually, he admitted the answer was no. Thoughts? Well, to me, I have always felt, first of all, I believe, as I think every gay person I've ever known or ever spoken to about this believes, that it is not a choice, that it is a part of your inborn nature, that you don't simply choose what your sexual orientation is. But when it comes to the question of rights and equality, I have long considered that question to be irrelevant. Whether you are born gay or you choose to be gay completely of your own volition, to me, doesn't make any difference. You should still have equal rights, and you should still have the option to marry any partner of your choice, like regardless of sex. I think it's a red herring. I think the issue of choice in sexuality is completely irrelevant to whether or not people of particular sexualities should have equal rights. Whether it's a choice or whether it's an inborn part of your nature, being gay does no harm to anyone. It is there is no reason to consider it deviant or abnormal or morally any different than being straight or being anything else. So whether it's a choice or not doesn't make any difference. People should have equal rights and equal opportunities regardless of their sexual orientation, period. So I kind of think that argument, when it comes to the rights issue, I think that argument is just sort of a waste of time, because it doesn't make any difference to me one way or the other. I think it does make a difference when you're talking about personhood, when you're talking about respect. If a gay person is saying, look, if you want to respect me, you need to understand who I am, and characterizing my sexuality as a choice is insulting and demeaning and inaccurate. It does not reflect the truth. Just as you as a straight person did not choose to be straight, I as a gay person did not choose to be gay. Like, in that arena, I think it's very important. And I think it's very important for people to know that and understand that and accept that, especially if they are a hetero person who wants to be an ally to LGBTQ people. I think you need to understand that. That's just basic knowledge. But when it comes to the issue of rights, I don't think it would matter one way or the other whether gay people were born gay or whether they chose to be gay. And I think it's a shame that your friend saw it that way, that your friend eventually admitted that, well, if they could choose to be straight instead of gay, then I would not believe in equality, because that's a shitty prejudicial view. And to me, the issue of whether it's a choice or whether it's a natural trait just doesn't enter into it. I mean, people deserve to be treated equally and fairly regardless of their sexual orientation, no matter how they come by it. But it just so happens that they are born with it. Next question is from David Colby. The year is 1898, and you, Stephen Shives, are living a normal life in the United States when the remarkable news breaks. Massive cylinders, apparently launched from the planet Mars, have landed in Britain. More cylinders have landed across Europe, the Americas, and there are reports from the various colonial powers that their holdings in Africa, Asia, and beyond have had landings. Excitement gives way to terror as the Martians emerge from their cylinders with terrifying tripod walkers and deadly heat rays. This sounds familiar. The British Empire's military was unable to stop their enemies, and in the 19th and early 20th century, the United States military was a mere shadow of what it would one day become. It seems that the Martians are going to be in your hometown within the week, bringing with them death and destruction. As you join the refugees fleeing, you hear of a most unlikely savior from the depths of Eastern Europe, Count Dracula. I did not read this question all the way through before I started reading it for the show just now, and I am so happy that I didn't. With genius intellect honed by centuries of alchemy and satanic practices, Dracula could take on a tripod himself, but with a growing army of the undead, he could take on the whole invasion. Now the question is this: would you seek refuge with the undead, knowing that your life would be given over to being livestock for a calculating tyrant? Or would you throw yourself into the likely doomed fight with the government in exile in New York City? Do you think Tesla's promises of building a human tripod is anything but hokum and moonshine? Where in this chaotic whirlwind of calamitous events does Steve fit? I was going to ask a serious political question, but your Facepalm 5 depressed me, so here we go. I am so happy that it went this direction. That is a absolutely delightful question that I did not see coming at all when I started reading it. So, I don't think I would want to become a vampire, just because there's always a downside to it. In the classical conception of vampires, the classical Western literary conception of vampires from which emerges Dracula, there's always a big downside to it. It sounds good at first, and then you realize, oh, I'm a vampire for the rest of eternity, and life is actually kind of going to suck now for me, despite the good parts and the powers and the immortality, etc., etc. I'm still going to envy the dead at some point. So no, I would not become a vampire, but my God, what a brilliant twist. I just absolutely, it's like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen shit. I love throwing Dracula and War of the Worlds together. It's like Dracula will lead the charge against the alien invaders, and he, ironically, the undead ghoul, the blood-drinking vampire tyrant, will be the one who chases the Martian invaders away from our planet and saves humanity. That's such a great idea. But no, I would not join with Dracula. I guess I would probably have to join the human resistance and end up getting heat rayed to death. So that would be fun. Next question is from Kizzy. Hi, I'm a biracial Brit. I wanted to ask a question about Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, and whether or not the bad press she is getting and the name-calling is racially based. It is as if she has caused a massive outrage by marrying into the royal family, and one so-called comedian even posted a picture of a chimp in a suit and called it the royal baby. Since the Duchess is also an American, I think that you have just as much legitimacy answering this question as any Briton. Yeah, I think it is racially based, and I think most people who are looking at it with any kind of fairness would agree with that. I mean, you can't. Yeah, if you show a picture of a baby chimpanzee and you say, "Look, it's the royal baby," and one of the child's parents is a person of color, yeah, that's racially based. That's racist, is what that is. Yeah, I don't see how you can deny that. That's it. That gives it away right there. If you say, oh, look, a chimpanzee must be the royal baby, and you're talking about Meghan Markle's baby, guess what? That's super racist. You should be ashamed of yourself. So yeah, I mean, as an American, as anybody who understands what racism is and how it works, yes, I think a lot of the criticism and negativity, bad press, as you say, dedicated toward Meghan Markle, and honestly, I have not been paying attention to that. So, I mean, I'll take your word for it that there's been a lot of bad press directed towards her. I don't know firsthand because I really don't pay much attention to royal family stuff, even when they marry Americans. But yeah, if that is the case, of course, it's racially motivated, especially stuff like that is explicitly racist. Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I just heard a tiny little roll of thunder in the background. I don't know if it came across the microphone or not, but just to let everybody know, we'll probably be fine, but in the unlikely event that as a result of this, what sounds like a storm going on outside, as if I lose power or my internet goes out, hang with me for at least a few minutes. I will try to get back online as quickly as possible, but I don't think that's going to happen. But just in case it does, it has happened before. Just want to give everybody a heads up that apparently there's a bit of thunder and lightning outside. So anyway, back to the patron questions. This next one is from Joshua Hillerup. What exactly is the relationship between Paramount and CBS with regards to Star Trek at this point? I don't really understand it at all, and my Google skills are failing me. Okay, well, I am not necessarily the expert on the subject, but I do think I have a basic understanding of what the arrangement is. So here goes. I will try to explain this. As it stands right now, CBS owns the intellectual property of Star Trek. Star Trek belongs to CBS Studios. Paramount has the exclusive movie license for Star Trek. So, and it owns the film library. So while CBS owns Star Trek in general and all of the intellectual property surrounding it, Paramount owns the film library, which is all the Star Trek movies, and Paramount has the exclusive right to make new Star Trek movies, which it can do, I think, without necessarily seeking any specific approval from CBS, right? Like if Paramount hires a writer or a production company and they come up with a really, really kick-ass idea for a Star Trek movie, I think they can make their Star Trek movie and they don't have to first take it to CBS and say, is this okay? I think that's the deal. But I could be wrong on that. But the other parts I am fairly certain about. CBS owns the Star Trek franchise. Paramount has the ownership of the film library and has exclusive rights to make new Star Trek movies. That's how it breaks down as it stands right now. Hope that was clear. Next question is from Isaiah Taylor. Is it possible to heal the political and cultural divides of our nation? Because I don't think it's possible. It may be possible. But honestly, I think there are other things that that are more urgent concerns to me. I think the idea of the nation coming together politically is a nice idea, but there are other far more urgent problems that I think need to be addressed and that I think can be addressed without seeking that unity first. I think that, for instance, with we just had our first Democratic Party primary debates last night and the night before, and it's got me thinking about all of this stuff. And I have thought for many years that it's a complete waste of time for Democratic candidates, at least for Democratic presidential candidates, to try to reach out to Republicans, to try to reach across the aisle, to try to flip Republicans or win conservative votes. I think there are enough people in this country right now who are already on the Democrats' side ideologically, or are at least leaning toward the Democrats' side ideologically, that if they can mobilize those people and win those people's trust and get those people excited about voting for them, they can win the presidency, they can win majorities in both houses of Congress, and they can push through an agenda that will solve a lot of the issues, or not, if not solve, at least address a lot of the issues that we are so concerned about these days in the United States, without having to pander to or persuade one single Republican. And I think that's what they should be doing. I think that's what they should be focusing on. And that is way more important to me than some kind of unity. And honestly, at this point, if there's to be unity in this country from where I stand, that unity is going to have to come from the other side. That unity is going to have to come from Republicans and conservatives moving our direction. Because Democrats have moved in their direction for the last 30 years, and for the most part, it has brought us nothing but trouble. And I think it's well past time that Democrats and liberals and leftists and pretty much everybody who is not a right-winger or a right-leaning person just stop reaching out a hand in friendship to people that are not willing to help you, that are not willing to compromise with you, that are only in it for themselves and to push their own agenda, and just say, you know what, we don't need you. We have the numbers ourselves. If we can just motivate people who are already sympathetic to our cause, we can win. So to hell with you. And if you want unity, then you come over here and we'll have unity. We're not going to come over to you anymore, because that accomplishes nothing. All that actually, it does accomplish something. It empowers right-wingers and conservatives, and it encourages conservative politicians to keep moving further and further and further over to the right and becoming more radicalized and more fringe-dwelling, which again is something that we have seen happen quite openly and blatantly over the last 10 years especially, but over the last 20 or 30 years in general. So yeah, you want unity, they're going to have to come over here. But I'm way more worried about other stuff before I'm worried about some kind of fairy tale political unity in this country. That does not attract me nearly as much as it does a lot of other people. Next question from Riley Dosh. Since we know you love Voyager so much, what are some of your actual favorite things about it? Well, yeah, there are lots of things I like about Voyager. Actually, I think I've mentioned him a time or two. I think it's got a terrific cast. I mean, I think the main thing I have against Voyager, the main problem with it, is the writing. I just don't think the writing in Voyager is very good most of the time. But the cast, the actors are tremendous. I mean, it's hard to imagine anyone doing a better job with Captain Janeway as that character is written than Kate Mulgrew does. I think she does a terrific job. I think Robert Picardo as the Doctor is fantastic. I think Jerry Ryan turned out to be such a wonderful surprise as Seven of Nine, because she was brought into the show in the middle of the show, and everybody thought this is like a cynical ploy to boost ratings. You have this gorgeous woman wearing a skin-tight outfit every week, and you're just trying to get, teenage boys to watch the show. And that's certainly part of what it was. There's no denying that. But she actually wound up being a really interesting character. And Jerry Ryan, as the actor playing her, did a fantastic job. So the actors are something about Voyager that I really, really enjoy. The premise is something I really, really enjoy. I wish they had done more with the premise. The Voyager had a better, or at least a more solid, clear-cut premise than any other Star Trek show, and it wasted it. Like, it just completely wasted its awesome premise of a Starfleet vessel, flung to the other side of the galaxy and faced with a 70-year journey back home. Like, that is a fantastic premise. That's a great starting point for a Star Trek show. And the frustrating thing is that Voyager just does nothing with it. But that premise itself is a great idea, and could have given that show such a wonderful singular identity and driven so many stories. And so much character development and so much conflict on the ship and from beyond the ship. And they just did so little with it. But yeah, that's something else that I think is fantastic about Voyager, that is an untapped and unrealized potential. I think, Robert Duncan McNeil was fantastic. I did a whole video about Tom Paris, and I was taking the piss out of him for a lot of it, but I think he's a really likable, really fun character. There are some good episodes of Voyager. I've mentioned The Thaw a bunch of times. I think The Thaw is a great episode. I think Death Wish, the first Q episode, is a really good episode. There are some really strong episodes throughout the run of the show. So yeah, there's lots of stuff about Voyager that I do genuinely enjoy and wish there had been more of, or wish that it had been better. Next question is from Ayame. It is a known fact that Al-Qaeda is more compassionate than pro-lifers because the 9/11 hijackers died instantly while cancer patients do not. Why don't more people know about this? Probably because it's kind of an inflammatory and and not a very clear point that you're making here. I'm not quite getting the connection between pro-lifers and cancer patients. Like, what's the connection between people who are against abortion rights and people who believe that cancer patients should, that cancer patients withering and dying in pain? Like, I don't really get that connection that you're making. And also, just when you start out with, it's a known fact that Al-Qaeda is more compassionate than Group X because they kill their suicide bombers instantly. I don't know about that. That is not exactly a proposition that I think I can get behind. I mean, yes, the 9/11 hijackers did die instantly themselves, but they also killed like 3,000 other people. So I don't know if you could call that compassion, even if the people you're comparing them to are anti-abortion activists, who I agree are no friends of ours and are not people I would want to support or compliment in any way. But would I want to say that Al-Qaeda is more compassionate than they are? No, I would not. So that's probably why more people don't know about it. The next question is from Blue Eye Shadow is Logical. The entire cast of TOS and everyone who had creative control, directors, writers, set, costume designers, etc., have time traveled from 1969 to the current day, and they're taking full advantage of the modern day camera and special effects technology to make a season 4 of TOS. They have a large budget and are no longer bound by 1960s censorship. What kinds of things that wouldn't have been possible in the 1960s would you like to see included in this new season? Are there any old episodes you'd want to see remade? I personally would enjoy a sequel to Shore Leave where they can really go nuts with the kinds of things the characters can dream up. Yeah, if they were going to do season 4 of TOS, if that is the premise, then I wouldn't want them to redo any old episodes. The old episodes can just stand perfectly well on their own. Straight gin, by the way, since everybody wants to know what I'm drinking. Yeah, I wouldn't remake any episodes, but what I want to see them go in other directions with the show. I would love to see a glimpse of Earth, because people forget in really actually, you know, in Star Trek in general we don't see much of Earth, like in any Star Trek series, but in the original series we didn't see the actual Earth at all. There was no scene of any episode of classic Star Trek that took place on our planet Earth. There were alternate Earths, but there was no 23rd century Earth scene in the show. We didn't see Earth until Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and of course that was a very different design aesthetic than Star Trek TOS. So if we were going to update, if we were to basically do like a fourth season of TOS, but update it so it's more in line with, say, the level of technology and the design aesthetic of Discovery, if the Enterprise would look like the Enterprise looks in season 2 of Discovery, which I am completely in favor of. I mean, God, what I would, if you could teleport the original Star Trek cast from 1969, drop them into today's environment and have them make more classic Star Trek episodes on those sets, on that Discovery version of the Enterprise bridge, and oh my God, that would be phenomenal. Oh God, I would love that. You could make 1 million episodes of that and I would never get tired of it. But so that would be fantastic. It would be nice to see Earth. It would be nice to see more conflict between Kirk and the Klingons, because, you know, Kirk versus Klingons, I have said before, is like meat and potatoes Star Trek to me. That's like Star Trek 101, man. Give me Kirk and Klingons, and I'm a happy Trekker. So yes, I don't know, it's just stuff like that. More Kirk versus Klingons. Maybe the occasional visit to Earth. I don't know. How about this? How about Star Trek episodes that on the surface are like fun space adventure stories, but just beneath the surface, they are actually very pertinent political and social allegories. That might be something to try too. If we can figure out any social issues in our current day and age that are worthy of that kind of commentary, which, you know, I don't know. Are there any? Probably not. Next question is from Andrew C. Hawkins. What do you think of cultural religiosity? That is, taking part in religious or religiously derived activities without accepting any religious dogma. I got married in a church, and I'd rather like to have my child baptized, but I can't help but feel a little disingenuous about it because I gave up belief a long time ago. No, I don't have a problem with that. I got married in a church too, and neither my wife nor I were believers, but we got married in a church because it was a church that had great significance to her and to her family and the history of her family. So we wanted to get married there, and I don't regret it. I thought it was a very nice wedding, and I had no qualms at all about getting married in a church, even though I myself am not a believer. So no, I don't have a problem with that. There are, I don't really feel a need for this myself, but I understand people who are comforted or centered or attracted to the sense of structure, the sense of continuity that comes with religious ceremony, whether or not they believe in the God of that religion or the supernatural claims of that church or not. There's something comforting about taking part in a ritual that your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents, etc., 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 have done. There's something very powerful about that. And if you view it as purely a ceremonial experience, if you view it as just a part of your culture, but not something that you sincerely believe in on a religious level, I personally don't see a problem with that. There are perhaps some more devout fundamentalist religious folks who might have a big problem with that, but I am not one of those. And I think if you want to go to church or get married in a church or have your child baptized or go through any other religious rite, as provided it's not harmful to anybody, because you think it gives your life some sense of purpose or meaning or makes you feel connected to other people in your life or gives you a feeling of community, I don't have a problem with that at all. You know, but yeah, other religious folks might, but I don't have an objection to it. I think you should do things as long as you're not harming yourself or harming anyone else. If there's something you can do that gives your life meaning and purpose and continuity, whatever, I think you should do it. Next question is from Trekkie0623. If a modern incarnation of Star Trek were to make an allegorical episode on a topic, what topic would you want them to cover and why? How should the episode best persuade its audience? Well, speak of the devil. I was just wondering if there were any political subjects in today's culture that would be ripe for the Star Trek treatment. God, there are so many. This is like at the Democratic debate last night, where the moderator said, "What's your one issue that you would focus on if you could only do one thing if you become president? What would your one issue be?" Like, what would my one Star Trek political issue be? There's so many. It's hard to vote against climate change at this point. But then again, it's also hard to vote against the rise of authoritarianism and fascism. I feel like there could be a very, very powerful Star Trek episode dealing with the threat of fascism on the rise. That would actually be a really good subject for the Picard show to address. I'm just saying. I don't know if that's in the plans, but that would be fantastic. But yeah, the rise of fascism, the rise of right-leaning authoritarianism, that would be great. Gun control, holy shit, that would be fantastic. LGBTQ rights would be fantastic, which is something that Star Trek has sort of dipped its toe in a bit here and there in the past. But it would be great to revisit that as well, maybe in a more inclusive way, maybe in a way that includes some more LGBTQ people in front of and behind the camera in the telling of that story. That would be great too. Yeah, there are. If the current creators of Star Trek decide that they want to go hardcore political with it again and want to get all classic Trek preachy with it, which I am all about, there's just no end of issues that they could address allegorically through Star Trek. And how should the episodes go about persuading people? I don't know. The classic Star Trek political episodes were not exactly subtle. I don't think we should beat around the bush. I think we should make our point as strongly and unequivocally as possible. Next question is from Stephen Kennedy. Have you seen the DS9 documentary? Of course you have. What a silly question to ask. And then there are a couple of horrifying smileys here. What's up with those? I saw it last October at a Star Trek convention, which was my first ever Star Trek convention. So here is my second silly question. Have you ever been to a Star Trek convention? Yeah, I have seen the DS9 documentary. It's fantastic. I highly recommend it, especially if you are a Deep Space Nine fan. And no, I have never been to a Star Trek convention. And this may be hard for some people to believe, given what a big Star Trek fan I am, but I've never really felt the desire to go. I'm not really much of a convention person. I've been to a few conventions. I went to a couple of horror conventions years back when I was working with Neon Reel Entertainment, and we had a film that was showing that was screening at film festivals at a couple of regional conventions, and I went in that capacity, and it just wasn't my cup of tea. I completely get why other people enjoy them and have a great time and look forward to them, but it's just not my thing. So I have never been to a Star Trek convention and never really felt the itch to go. Next question is from General Contact Unit Problem Child. In your video about Garrick and your last Trek Actually Comment Responses video, you said you believe that there are some people, particularly people who commit war crimes or crimes against humanity, who can be considered to be beyond redemption. I don't understand how you can square this with a non-supernatural worldview. I don't believe anything supernatural exists. That includes free will. Ultimately, I think that all the choices we make are just the result of forces, most particularly internal workings of our brain that we have no control over, compelling us to act in one way or another. If someone who's done terrible things, no matter what those things are, undergoes some kind of transformation that changes their character in such a way that they won't do it again, it seems wrong to me to say they must continue to pay for their past actions past that point. That's what I was talking about last time when I said forgiveness can be a moral obligation in some situations. Well, when you put it that way, I think I see more where you're coming from. And if obviously, if we assume that a person is capable of becoming a different person or of growing and changing to such a degree that they really would never do that sort of thing again, or becoming such a different person that it almost seems unfair to hold this person who is standing here now accountable for things they did back then, even if those things were really, really terrible. Like when you put it that way, imagining such a circumstance, yes, I can say maybe in certain cases like that, it might be unfair to continue to hold someone accountable for crimes they committed when they were a completely different person. But here's the catch. I don't think in real life that ever happens. And even if you agree that even if you share your belief that free will is an illusion, that life is deterministic and our choices aren't really choices, we're just doing the only thing that we could do in the circumstance, and life is actually something that we have no control over. Even if you agree with that and hold that view, the illusion of free will is so convincing to us that even if we aren't really making meaningful choices, it sure feels like we are. So I don't really see any other way that it makes sense to arrange our society or arrange our morality. Like, I don't think it makes sense, given how complete and all-encompassing and impenetrable the illusion of free will is. I don't think it makes sense to structure our society or to structure our moral concepts around the notion that we're not making meaningful choices. You know what I mean? I feel like it makes more sense to arrange our society and our thoughts around the assumption that we are capable of making moral choices and that it is right and just and fair and necessary to hold us accountable for the choices that we make, particularly when those choices result in harm coming to other people. That's just the version that makes the most sense to me. So I would not argue for anything other than that. But if there were such a case as you propose in your question, where a person commits a horrible crime and then they undergo some kind of transformation that makes them into a totally different person, in that situation, I guess maybe it would be acceptable to release them from responsibility for their past crimes. But in real life, I don't think that ever happens. And I especially don't think it happens for the types of of war criminals and people like the Nazis that I was talking about in that video, who have committed the most monstrous acts of mass murder in the history of humanity. I don't think it's possible for one of those people to say, "Oh, I'm reformed. I'm better now. You don't have to hang me. I'm better now. I killed all those people, but I'm over it. I'm a completely different person now. I would never do that again." Like, I don't think that radical of a transformation is possible. Or if it is possible, it is on such a remote edge of possibility that we should not expect it to happen. Next question from By the Lake 23. Is imperialism to an American like water to a fish? You don't realize that you're the villains in the history books of the future. That is a great way to put it. Yes, I think that's right on, because in our education systems, in our cultures, in the ways that we as Americans are taught from birth to think of ourselves and think of our culture and think of our country and its place in history and its place in the world, there is very, very little encouragement for us to even be open to the possibility that we might have been the bad guys. Yeah, I think that the fish in water analogy is right on. We are so used to thinking of ourselves as the exceptional nation, as the indispensable nation, as the nation that frees people from oppression, the nation that ends wars, the nation that comes to the rescue of people. Like, we're so used to thinking of ourselves that way that the mere suggestion that we may have caused more harm than we've done good, and that we are actually historically the most destructive and exploitative imperial power that there has ever been, like that, the suggestion of that is just so alien to so many Americans that it is like a fish in water. Absolutely. That's a great analogy, and I think unfortunately that's accurate in quite a number of cases. Next question is from JJ Temba, his arms wide. Any thoughts on the Tamarians? Are they a thriving spacefaring civilization on the equal of any other Alpha Quadrant power, just with a unique method of communication? Or are they a regressed society, inheritors of their ancestors' technology, but socially devolved through such an extreme form of conservatism that they can no longer comprehend anything outside their own narrow cultural idioms, doomed to a slow decline without the possibility of further advancement because they are closed to new ideas? That's an interesting take on them. That's not how I saw them at all, actually. I didn't see them as limited in that way. I don't think that was the intention behind creating it. I think the intention behind creating the Tamarians and having them communicate in that very peculiar way was just to create the barrier between Picard and Captain Dathan, so that then Picard could overcome that. Like that's the whole reason why they were made that way. And anything beyond that, I think, is reading into it a little too much. But since your question invites me to read into it too much, no, I think they demonstrate in that episode that they're capable of absorbing new information, because at the very end you get the addition of Picard and Dathan at El Adrel. That's new information. That's a new story that they have added to their culture. And it's suggested throughout the episode when we see those scenes of Data and Troy doing research and trying to figure out what these people are going on about. It seems as though the stories that they base their metaphorical language on come from a different culture, or at least come from maybe a culture that predates their current culture. So they're not repeating stories or repeating references constantly to their own culture to each other necessarily. They're repeating references to some other culture that they're familiar with, but that is someone else's culture as well. So I think there's the suggestion there that they can absorb new information and that they can adapt. They just have a very idiosyncratic way of communicating, but it seems to work for them. I mean, they've got warp drive. They're able to hold their own against the Enterprise in that episode. So I mean, I don't think they certainly don't seem to be a society in decline. They just sure you got a funny way of talking. That's all. Next question is from Joe McClory. I was watching your Trek video today, Wednesday, and you were addressing this comment in your video. What does liking Trump's policies have to do with Star Trek? I hate violent criminals, so does that mean I shouldn't like The Shawshank Redemption or Orange is the New Black because they feature lots of criminals, stupid argument, and dumb logic? Movies and TV shows are just entertainment. Hell, I'm black, and I used to watch Archie Bunker's openly racist ass and still enjoyed the show. So I guess if you're a social democrat, you shouldn't like The Wolf of Wall Street or the character Carlton Banks because of their pro-capitalist views. Stop trying to inject politics into everything and just enjoy these forms of entertainment for what they are. Jeez. I liked your response and generally agree with you, but you kind of only touched on what I think is the most interesting bit of the question. I think there is something very telling in the other examples the commenter used, and it is all about the framing. A major point of All in the Family was Archie Bunker was wrong for being bigoted, and the show made a point of showing that. Orange is the New Black goes out of its way to show that the ladies are far more than just violent criminals, and so on. I know time has watered down the term fan from its origin as shorthand for fanatic, but I don't know if it's reasonable to call someone a fan of something when they so deeply misunderstand the spirit, the framing, and kind of the point of a thing. I understand you don't want to be a gatekeeper, and I agree with that to a point, but I mean, someone who misunderstands Star Trek that bad is a fan the same way someone who hates baseball is a fan of the Orioles because they live in Maryland and want the home team to do well. I guess that's not really a question. So what's your take on my opinion? Yeah, I see where you're coming from. And that's why I draw a distinction between saying that whether or not someone is a fan and saying that I don't understand it. Like you say, and like I said in the video, I don't want to be a gatekeeper, and I don't want to pass judgment on whether or not someone is a real fan or not, because there are so many insufferable assholes who do that, who claim the authority for themselves to decide who is a real fan and who isn't. And I just don't want to do that. Even to people who I think are fucking assholes, who, as you say, completely miss the point of the thing. And I agree. If you look at Star Trek as like this apolitical thing, as just entertainment, you have missed the point almost more than I would have thought it possible to miss the point. Because as we've mentioned in a couple of questions already tonight, it ain't subtle. Like, Star Trek's political commentary is not subtle at all. It smacks you in the face with it like a cold fish. Like, you can't miss it. So if you do miss it and you're like, Star Trek, it's just a fun space adventure show, nothing political going on there, yeah, you have missed one of the most important points of the show in a way that I just cannot fathom. But I don't want to say that it doesn't mean you're a real fan. It just means you're an incredibly obtuse, oblivious fan. Like, so oblivious that I would maybe want you to, to limit your interaction with the outside world. Like, if you miss the point that Star Trek is political, you may be a danger to yourselves and to yourself and others. And I mean, Archie Bunker and All in the Family is another great example. Like, how do you watch that show and not get that it's a political show? It's even more blatant than Star Trek. Archie and Meathead and Gloria are having open political arguments on the show. They're arguing about political issues on the show. There's no allegory. There's no metaphor. There's no separation. They're just having political arguments. How do you watch that show and go, nothing political about that? Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get how you can be that oblivious to something that is right in your face. And I don't get how you can be a conservative and like shows like that when, as I said in the video that you're referring to, shows like Star Trek and shows like All in the Family are constantly telling you as a conservative that you are wrong and you are the problem. I don't get how you can call yourself a huge fan of such a show, but people do, and it is not for me to say that they aren't fans. Next question is from Francois Lacombe. What was your reaction to the Starfleet emblem that the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter found on Mars? Yeah, if you haven't seen that, you should look that up. You should Google that. It is really cool. They found, it's like a giant, it was a lava flow, right? It's like a big chevron. It's a bunch of them. They're big chevron shapes in the Martian surface. And they were caused by ancient lava flows that just sort of were shaped that way. And yeah, they do look a lot like the Starfleet insignia, like that on my shirt there. They look a lot like that. They're not quite that exact shape, but they're close enough, and they're really cool. And yeah, that's what I thought. I just thought it was really cool. I thought it was a neat instance of pareidolia, or maybe we could say, if we want to do really wishful thinking, we could say, well, it's the start of the temporal loop that leads to the creation of Star Trek in reality, right? Star Trek begins as a TV show, but then we see Starfleet symbols, or what appear to be Starfleet symbols, on Mars, and we think, oh, and we end up founding the real version of Mars colony. We end up building a real Utopia Planitia shipyard in orbit around Mars, all inspired by these Starfleet insignia discovered in the Martian surface. And before you know it, Star Trek is not just a TV show, it's the real thing, But in reality, it's just a really cool little coincidence that there are Starfleet-looking symbols on Mars. Next question is from Matthew Rick. Have you seen the Chernobyl series on HBO? And if so, what are your thoughts? I have not seen it. I want to see it. I plan to watch it at some point. But I have not seen it yet. And for that reason, I have no thoughts. Thank you for the question. Next question is from some random geek. Hey, Steve, it is time for Leto Anor's favorite part of the Ask Away, my question in the form of a mini essay that you always read out that might radicalize some of your fans. Now on to the question, or mini essay. In response to economic questions and some political science questions, you would say something like that is above my pay grade. That answer irks me. If you say that is beyond my knowledge base, or that is not my area of expertise, that's perfectly fine. And I like you when you say, I don't know, and don't go on pretending to know when you don't. But saying something is above your pay grade implies that only certain people of a certain wealth status will have knowledge of a subject. It implies that there is a hierarchy of knowledge, and only people that achieve a certain level of knowledge deserve more money than someone else. It is almost an American way of thinking, as Innuendo Studios explains in the alt-right playbook video you provided your voice to, Always a Bigger Fish. And there's the link there, and I did remember to link that in the description of this video, so you can check that out later if you haven't seen that video. It's a really cool video that Innuendo Studios did. But I hate that mindset that someone deserves more money or a lot more money for something that they have done or knowledge they acquired. But who determines that? Who makes that decision? Who set up the hierarchy? Is the hierarchy justified? I also hate that it is a given that only people with certain pay grades would know about economics or other subjects. And I hate that this hierarchical mindset is so common amongst many people. There will always be hierarchies. You can't get rid of them. But I really wish more people would just question these hierarchical systems and ask, are these hierarchies justified? Do we need these hierarchies? What and who do these hierarchies benefit? Especially since with the pay grade thinking tends to cause others to say, one must earn an education, it's not a right. And that thinking justifies the idea that it is okay for there to be that it is okay for there to be an underclass that doesn't deserve food, water, housing, and healthcare. They want it, they must pay for it. It just sucks for those who can't. Hint to the charity links. How can we get people to realize the problem with these ways of hierarchical thinking and convince them that everyone deserves food, water, housing, healthcare, and an education? We can achieve that utopia. A utopia is possible if we really want to. Well, since you mentioned it in the question, yes, I also want to draw everybody's attention to the charity links that are in the description that are actually at the very top of the description of this video. You can click through to find out more about some of our friends who are in some trouble and could use some financial assistance if you're able to provide it. Please check out the charity links in the description of this video if you have time and if you have the ability to give. Or if you can't give, then feel free to share them and maybe some other people can see them and help out. But as to the question, well, yeah, I mean, obviously, and you know this, obviously, some random geek, when I say it like it's above my pay grade, yeah, I'm that's an idiom. That's just a figure of speech. But you're right that the fact that I use that figure of speech and that everybody knows what I mean when I say it, that is evidence that that mindset has filtered through our language and our consciousness in this culture to such a degree, you know, so that we use that idea of, well, I'm not paid enough to know that, or you'd have to ask somebody who makes more money than me to know that. Like the fact that I can even use that metaphor is evidence of the problem that you're talking about. And I agree with you. It is a problem. It's something, you know, as far as using phrases like that, that's probably something I should think about, I should be more aware of, and I should find other ways to make that point. I should find other ways to express that. Just like I have to find ways of when I want to refer to chaos instead of calling it anarchy, right? Because Garrett has let me know a couple of times now that I have made that mistake and has corrected me on that a couple of times, and as have you too, I think, some random geek, which I appreciate, because I'm completely sympathetic to that. Like I don't want to unthinkingly disparage people, you know, with the language that I use, even if that's not what I mean by it. So something like above my pay grade does perpetuate that mindset, even if that's not what I intend to do by using that phrase, and I should probably watch that. And I mean, how do we convince people that things like education and necessities like food and water and housing and healthcare ought to be rights, not privileges that they earn? I think the only way to do it is to keep talking about it and to keep framing them in those terms. You know, a lot of people talk about, well, what argument can we use? You know, what argument can we use to convince someone that healthcare is a human right, that education is a human right, that someone shouldn't have to earn in order to get? And I think, you know, having a good argument certainly helps, but I think a lot of it is also just framing the issue. If we, as people who support those things, keep talking about them in those terms, if we keep talking about healthcare as a human right, not a commodity, if we keep talking about education as a human right, not a commodity, if we keep talking about food and housing as rights rather than commodities, rather than something that only people who can afford them should be allowed to have, then eventually that will normalize that way of thinking. That will normalize those conceptions of those things. And I think that helps too. So I think that's a big thing too. I mean, look at the Democratic debates that just took place this week. I missed the first one, actually. I didn't get to see Elizabeth Warren the first night. She's still sort of the candidate that I'm leaning toward the most at this point. But I did see last night's, and what I noticed was there were a lot of those candidates who were talking in those terms, who were talking about Medicare for all, we're talking about universal health care, and we're talking about it in terms of it is a right. It is a right that people deserve. It's not something that people should only get if they can pay for it. It's something that everybody should have as a birthright of being human. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that a lot of their constituents, or a lot of the people that they hope will vote for them, are thinking in those terms and talking in those terms. So I think that's really important, to keep pushing that message and to keep framing those issues in that way, because that normalizes it, that gets people used to thinking of it in that way. And that's very important to convincing people to view it in that way, and to want to see it legislated and put into practice on that basis. Next question is from John Burnsy. Captains of naval ships do not concern themselves with economies of their own societies unless those societies are failing. I can understand if you're a naval captain in a banana republic where politics are the reason for your position. And I remember hearing about how some generals were bribed by Nick Cage in the movie Lord of War because of the failing Soviet and post-Soviet economy. But when you're paid by the biggest government in the world, you don't concern yourself with where your next paycheck comes from. I posted another question about applying present-day conventions for a hypothetical war crime or crimes against humanity trial with Robert E. Lee as the defendant. I don't know if you are editing it, but I haven't seen it here for a while. Editing or not, I do want to have a question for tomorrow. I haven't edited it, so if you've posted that question and I've missed it, I'm not sure what the deal is there, but I haven't edited it. Anyway, if you decided to disallow my Robert E. Lee question, my question is, do you not agree that your July Star Trek video shouldn't be titled Reasons Why the Economy of the Federation is Irrelevant? James T. Kirk is an explorer and a warrior solving problems of navigation and tactics are his concern. Spock is more interested why a certain star flickers differently than other stars in the same sector of space, and Scotty is always concerned with the laws of physics. None of them are concerned about where their future paychecks are coming from. Sure, you add in other characters who might need a reason for a nod to money or credits, but for the most part, the economy of the Federation doesn't matter much. As Homer wrote in the Iliad or the Odyssey, his main concern was describing an adventure, not explaining why Greece's economy was the envy of the world. Oh crud, I've brought politics into Star Trek again, haven't I? Sorry. As for the Robert E. Lee question, as I said, I'm not sure what happened there. If you posted that and I missed it, I'll just take responsibility for that, but I wasn't intentionally leaving that out or anything. But as to the question that you actually asked, I think you're talking about the August video, which isn't official yet. The last time I checked the poll, the economics of Star Trek question was in the lead, but I don't think it has actually won yet. But the July video will be the Star Trek Insurrection video. But if the economy video is the August video, yeah, I think those are all good ideas, and I think actually that's one of the main differences between the world we live in and the world we see the characters of Star Trek live in, is that the economic concerns are just not on their radar. They just don't have to worry about that because they live in a utopian society. They don't have to worry about where their paycheck is coming from. They don't have to worry about where they're going to live, how they're going to eat, if they get sick, what's going to happen. They don't have all of that is a thing of the past. And so they can focus on work that gives meaning to their lives. They can focus on things they're really interested in. They can focus on living up to their responsibilities if they are in the military, or Starfleet, excuse me, because Starfleet's not the military. Starfleet's not the military, but come on. They can focus on that instead of worrying about economic stuff. That's the biggest difference. And yeah, that is certainly something I will bring up in that video, if and when that becomes the subject of a Trek Actually video. Absolutely. Next question is from Radical Bacon. There's a leftist streamer that I watch on the regular, and while interacting with his audience, someone brought having a discussion with you. He didn't know who you were, so he looked you up on Twitter and found that ContraPoints follows you. So the question is, how'd you get Natalie to follow you? I found out where she lives, and every day when she steps outside, I'm waiting there with a bouquet of flowers and a bottle of champagne. And I don't say anything. I just hand them to her, and she very kindly takes them and goes back inside and probably throws them away, or puts them next to the door, and then goes back out and goes about her business. And I go back to the train station and come home. And that's what I do. I've been doing that every day for the last 3 or 4 years. And actually, now that she follows me on Twitter, I probably should stop doing that. It's probably more of a form of harassment at this point than it is a form of flattery. So I should stop doing that. No, the real she's followed me on Twitter for a while. Actually, I think she followed me before she really like blew up and became a big star. So I sort of got in early, you know. But she's followed me on Twitter for a few years, and it's a very fortunate thing, because she's like, if I raise my hand and go, Natalie, like, she'll usually pay attention to me if I have something I want her to look at or something to say, which is nice, because not only is she a brilliant, fantastic person who makes amazing content, but now she's a big shot. So I can't really say that she's a friend, because we don't know each other that well, but I have a friendly acquaintance who is something of a big shot. So that's nice. She's followed me for years. I can't remember exactly why she started following me back then, but it's been a while. It's been quite a while since she's followed me on Twitter. And it's very cool. It's very cool to have Natalie follow me on Twitter. And this is the last question. It is from John Brockman. Under the wire. Hope so. I have a new kitten named Sasha. Found him in a Papa John's parking lot, crying and pretty badly hurt. The vet thinks we may be able to save his tail. Question. On a scale of much to all, how much more qualified for the office is my cat than any Republican? I assume office of the president is the office being referred to there. I would say very much. I would say your cat, or any cat, is very much more qualified for the office of president than any Republican. And I can relate to where the cat is coming from. Hopefully you can sort out the cat's health problems, and Sasha will be okay, and you'll be able to save Sasha's tail. But the last time I was stuck in a Papa John's parking lot, I was crying too. Like, that's just that is nowhere that you want to be, especially if you were hoping to get some good pizza. You don't want to be in the Papa John's parking lot. That's the last place in the world you want to be. Hey, that's it for the patron questions. Now I'm going to actually pay attention to the live chat. So thanks, patrons, for submitting those questions. And for everybody who has been waiting for me in the live chat, let's start asking some questions in the live chat, because I'm looking now. Again, a super chat from K Prince. Wow, right off the bat. Thank you very much, K Prince. And it says, I have to ask, with everything that came out with the Mueller report and the fact that it was a roadmap to impeach Trump, will you watch Mueller when he testifies to Congress on July 17th? Oh, hell yes. I will definitely be watching Mueller's testimony. I will try to watch it live. If I can't catch it live, I will certainly catch a recording of it as soon as I'm at liberty. Yes, I will be watching Mueller's testimony very, very attentively. Yes. Carlisle, the Cinephile, says, in response to your last Star Trek comment video, do you think that Jadzia Dax was fridged? I think a much better case can be made for her than Tasha. I saw that comment. I saw you leave that comment on the video, and I don't know. I think I would say the same thing about Jadzia as I would say about Tasha. I think you might be able to make a case that she was fridged in that episode, but in general, I don't know if I can say that she was fridged. I think she was too important of a character to be fridged. I think it's more of a, like, I don't think you could say any time a character is abruptly killed off that it's a fridging. I think that the trope is a little more specific than that. But maybe you could say that within the context of her last episode, you might be able to say she was fridged. But I don't know. That's very iffy to me. I wouldn't want to say that. Some random geek. I have not had a chance to listen to Adam's new song yet. I'm sorry, Adam. I haven't. I got you. You sent me a link to it, and I just haven't had a chance to listen to it yet. So I am deeply sorry that I haven't had a chance to hear it yet. But no, I have not heard the song yet. Malevolent Divinity. Would you have a discussion with Vaush? He's said and done some yikesy things, but seems repentant and like he's earnestly trying to do good in the world. I don't know him personally at all. All I know about him is what I've seen of him on Twitter, and I didn't know anything about him on Twitter until the last couple of weeks when he was being dragged for saying some of that yikesy stuff. So at this point, no, I would not talk to him. But who knows? Give it time. Kradami was killing all the lawyers necessary for Earth's utopia. Apparently not. There are still lawyers in Star Trek The Next Generation, so apparently it was not necessary. Pedro Nagira. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Pedro R. Nagira. Or Negaira. One of those. I'm in the ballpark, I know. I took Spanish. I should know this. Anyway, Steve, I have a beast at Tanagra for you. Will Wheaton is Commander Riker in a TNG reboot. Who would you choose to play Picard, Worf, Data, Troy, Dr. Crusher, Geordi, and Q? Thank you from Brazil. So maybe it's Portuguese instead of Spanish. I'm sorry for that. God damn, I don't know who I would have to play all those people. I honestly don't. I mean, I think Wheaton as Commander Riker isn't necessarily the best casting, but then again, it's an interesting idea. Like, it's intriguing. So I might be up for it just for that factor. But who would play? I think I said last time I'd be really interested to see Christopher Eccleston play Picard. I think that would be really, really fun. As for the other characters, honestly, you asked me too quick. I have no idea. I really have no idea who else I would want to see play Worf or Data or Troy or Crusher or Geordi. I don't know. Suggestions in the chat if anybody has dream casts for a TNG reboot. Adam Rainstopper, Steve, yesterday CVS didn't have my prescription and I did not trash the place. Am I a good boy? Absolutely. Congratulations. Amazing restraint that you showed, not trashing the CVS. There's another super chat there from John Burns. Thanks for this, bud. War Crimes Tribunal for Lee? Yes, thank you for asking again. Yes, I would I think one of the reasons, I understand where Lincoln was going. I understand that Lincoln wanted to bring the country back together after this catastrophic war, and I'm completely sympathetic to that, and I'm not saying that I wouldn't have been on board with that had I been alive at the time. But looking back with the benefit of hindsight, I think one of the great mistakes and one of the things that allowed the Confederacy to live on in spirit for so long, even after it was vanquished in the war, was that there were no consequences imposed on the leaders of the war from the Confederate side. I do think there should have been a war crimes tribunal for Lee. I think you can argue very convincingly that he did commit war crimes, or he was at the very least party to war crimes, as were many other Confederate generals. And I think there absolutely should have been a war crimes tribunal for Lee, 100%. Would it have made coming back together after the war a lot more difficult? Sure, but it was difficult anyway. And in many ways, we still haven't come back together. You know, there was Reconstruction that was very, very easy and gentle on the South, all things considered. And people who are of that mindset in the South today still resent Northerners for it, still think they got the short end of the stick after the war, and, you know, probably always would have felt that way because we took their slaves away. So yeah, I think there should have been a war crimes tribunal for Lee and for other Confederate leaders, for Jefferson Davis as well. Yeah, absolutely. 255 AD, my mom said, I don't think it's always fair to let people who used to be men compete against women. How should you respond to a comment like that from friends or family? Well, here's what I would say. I don't know if this is the best answer to that, and I don't know if this is the most persuasive answer to that. But what I would say is I would correct the mistake that they're making when a person says, I don't think it's fair to let a person who used to be a man. I would say, well, they didn't used to be a man. They are a trans woman, and that's what they have always been, regardless of the gender that they were exhibiting, externally, whether they were living as a man or not. If they are a trans woman, that is who they've always been. So they didn't used to be a man; they're a woman. So I would correct that misunderstanding first before I said anything else, and then I would say mind your own fucking business. Andrew Priest, why must Star Trek shows always be set in Starfleet? How good could Voyager have been if it was a small Romulan ship lost in the Delta Quadrant, an almost amoral species, just different enough from humanity? That's an intriguing idea. They almost did, I think in the 90s, during the last big Star Trek boom on television, at least. I think there was some there was some consideration to doing a series centered around Klingons. It never really got very far. I don't think it got beyond the earliest stages of the development phase, but there was at least a suggestion to do that. So it would be very interesting for somebody to do a Star Trek show based on, centered on another species. I would give that a shot, actually. Okay, here's another one from John Burns. Another super chat, too. Thank you, John. Okay, now a twist. 9/11. Will it really have a closure? Will there ever be a Nuremberg or 2 nukes? I sincerely hope the former. Will there ever be a Nuremberg for 9/11? No. No, I don't think so. And that's whether there's a Nuremberg or not, I would very much like to see the so-called war on terror come to an end. Will that ever happen? I don't know. Will that ever have a definitive conclusion? I have no idea. I hope so, but I don't know. Another super chat I just got from Jason1517. Love your content. Thank you, Jason, very much. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the super chat. Let me see. A Trance, would you say the Democratic Party has shifted to the left in the last couple of years? Yes, not as much as I would like, but yes, definitely. I think if you watch the debates this week, or at least the one of them that I saw, it was certainly a lot further to the left than it was last time around. Still not as far as I would like. And I think candidates like Joe Biden, for example, who are very much sort of middle of the road moderates, are still doing way too well in the polls for my taste. But yes, I do think there has been some leftward shift, and I'm very happy to see that, and I hope it continues. Here's one from Race Carlock. Steve, do you watch Lily Orchard? She's a Native American trans children's cartoon analyst. If not, check her out. I know of her, but I don't think I've ever watched her. So I will take your recommendation to heart, and I will try to check out some of her videos soon. But no, I've never watched her. But I know who you're talking about when you say. Evan B., what gave you the idea to do your Whirlpool series? Sorry if you have answered this question before, but I love that seriously so much as an ex-Mormon. Okay. Well, the Whirlpool started out as a parody of this real guy named Michael Voris, who is a traditionalist Catholic who has a YouTube channel. I think now it's called Church Militant, but he used to do a show called The Vortex. And I don't know if he still does The Vortex or not. I don't really pay attention to him anymore, but it started out as just a straight parody of that guy. And I did those original videos years and years ago. And then I brought it back this year as something new, and it's still partially a takeoff, a spoof of Michael Voris, but it's a little more, it has a little bit more going on now. There's ongoing storylines. There's this whole background, this whole fiction of the one true church that I introduced, and it's just I love religious satire. I love writing and performing that character, and I get to write it with my friend Christopher, who has been helping me with the writing this season, and is a terrific writer. So it's a great experience to work with him and to have the benefit of his talent to work on the scripts with, and yeah, it's fun to write. It's fun to do, and I like being able to take a character like that and yes, use him to make fun of religion. Yes, use him to make fun of religious people having silly beliefs. But I also make a very strong point of using him to make fun of conservatism, to make fun of right-wing politics, to make fun of bigotry and prejudice, because that is something that unfortunately a lot of prominent atheists don't do. And they're perfectly willing to point at religious people and say, look at those religious people, look how terrible they are, and even make fun of them. But they don't realize that there are other, possibly even more important targets that need their attention. And if they're going to be satirists or attempt to be satirists, need their to be the subjects to be the targets of satire. So I use Michael Worley to make fun of all kinds of stuff, of religion, of conspiracy theories, of misogyny, of transphobia and homophobia, of fascism, of people who are tolerant or friendly to fascism and Nazism, as has been a topic in the most recent video that just went up today. So yeah, he's a vehicle that allows me to satirize and make fun of and comment on a lot of things that I think are important and worthy of mockery and worthy of people keeping an eye on and being worried about. Jason 1517, you don't have to apologize if you've been asking questions and I haven't seen them or I haven't answered them. That's not your fault. That's my fault, because I haven't. I know I miss a lot of questions in the live chat because it goes by so fast sometimes. And so if you asked a question in the live chat and I haven't seen it, that's on me. It's not because you've been asking poor questions. You may have been asking poor questions. I just haven't seen them. So. 9th Dallas Mower Expo. Congratulations, Steve. You have won a worldwide competition to have one law passed worldwide forever. What do you pick and why? I pick a worldwide, globally enforceable equal rights amendment that applies to everyone, protects everyone from discrimination regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, national origin, religion, basically all of the protected categories you can name. And I would want that established worldwide in every country, enforceable all around the globe. That would be my one law that I would have passed. Ken, big fan, been watching a ton of your stuff, but I'm curious as to what YouTubers of the left do you watch? Always looking for more great content. I mean, you've probably heard of them already. I try to catch ContraPoints whenever she comes out with a new video. Philosophy Tube, H Bomber Guy, of people with smaller audiences. Obviously, if she's one of my very dear friends. I love Christy Winters. I love Kevin Logan. I used to watch Foxy Jezebel a lot, but she doesn't make videos very much anymore, but she would be someone who was very much on my list. They don't really do video. They haven't done videos lately, but they do podcasts. So I try to keep up with the Feminist Frequency podcasts as much as I can. Yeah, those are just some off the top of my head that, that I think are good. But you've probably heard of most of them or all of them. So probably not very much help. Nobody Listens says, I've been working on my first novel for a while. One of the problems I have is that I often think people will call it derivative of other material. How do I get over that? Focus on the parts that are original to you. If you have an idea for something that is derivative of something else, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Just put it in your own voice, put it in your own words, tell it from your perspective, make it yours. You derived it from somebody else, but make it yours. So even if people will say, oh, it's derivative of this, you can come back and say, yeah, but it's my version. That's the old saying, and I think it's actually a verse from the King James Bible. There is nothing new under the sun. Like there is a great deal of truth to that. At this point, we're all just coming up with variations on themes. So if you have come up with a variation on a theme that, it's a theme that other people might associate with something else and call it derivative, like that's okay. Just do your thing. Just work on your story and tell it the best that you can. Here's John Brockman with the question I skipped because he asked two questions in the patron section. On a scale of Franco to Hitler, how fascist is the Republican Party? And I told you weren't going to find this out, but you found a loophole, didn't you, John? I think they're still closer to Franco than Hitler, but boy, every time I hear something new about what's going on at the border, they get closer and closer over to the Hitler side, don't they? Oh, God. Closer to Hitler than I would prefer. I would prefer us to not be on the Franco-Hitler scale at all. But I would prefer us not to be closer to the Hitler side, and we keep inching further and further toward the Hitler side. So yeah, I think we're still more Franco than Hitler, but closer to Hitler than I would like us to be. Radical Bacon, have you seen Philosophy Tube's new video? Yes, because he released it, on Monday, I think, and I actually had time to watch it before the show this week. So yes, I saw it, and God, I thought it was great. I thought it was so good. I actually tweeted about it, and it was more than just, hey, look at this, isn't this awesome? Like I actually had I tried to offer some comments on it that I thought would be of some good to people. And I just noticed another super chat from John Burns. Thank you, John. Back to Philosophy Tube. Yeah, I love the fact that all of the different elements of it could have been their own standalone video, but he wove them together into one cohesive thing. I like his simple direct to camera presentation of the arguments. I thought that was very strong, as it always is. I mean, and you know, you could just that could just be a video, because that's what a lot of people do, including this guy. I do a lot of videos like that. His scene that he does with the arsonist and the Ben Shapiro surrogate, the Ben Shapiro analog that he plays, that by itself makes the point very well and could have been a video all by itself. And then also his impersonation of the Ben Shapiro character doing the recreation of Ben Shapiro's show was just fantastic and is a brilliant piece of spoofery, and that could have been its own video as well. So all three of those things could have been their own video, and he twisted them together into one video, and it was just brilliant. I really, really, really liked it. You know, I'm scrolling through, and again, I apologize if I miss your question. 255 AD says, why did Bernie say throwing judges off the Supreme Court is constitutional when it very obviously isn't? I have no idea what the fuck Bernie Sanders was talking about last night when he said it's constitutional to rotate judges to other assignments. I have never seen that. I have never seen that anywhere in the Constitution. I don't think that's in the Constitution. I don't think there is settled law that says you can do that. I have never heard anyone say that in my life before Bernie Sanders said that. I'm sure he's not the first person to say that. I'm sure he gets that from somewhere, but I am not familiar with it. I have no idea what the hell he is talking about. That you can rotate judges off of the Supreme Court to a different court. I don't know what he's talking about. It sure sounds unconstitutional to me. Kias Duo or Duo. Pro-black queer here. Steve, notice alt-right and right-wing racists like Sam Harris, Shapiro, etc. often project their evil and vile behavior onto others, like victim mentality and stifling speech. Yes, that's absolutely what they do. There's so much projection that goes on from folks like that. Completely agree with you there. Malevolent Divinity, on the trans topic, wouldn't it be better to get rid of gender separation in favor of more relevant divisions? One example being weight class. Possibly. I don't know. I'm certainly not in a position to make that determination. I feel like it's probably still okay to have gender divisions, as long as those divisions are adjudicated fairly to trans people, so that trans people are not punished for being who they are and you know, made unable to compete fairly in the division that they belong in. But yeah, as for maybe there is a better way other than gender divisions. I'm not sure. I haven't really thought about it. Adam Rainsubber has an interesting idea. I have an idea as an answer to the question for trans women in sports. It's fucking sports. If one could prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that they had an overwhelming advantage, it still doesn't justify exclusion because it is fucking sports and you don't fuck with people's rights in defense of sports. Great point, Adam. I completely agree. Here's another super chat from John Burns. Thank you again so much. Trump just looks too much like Mussolini for me. Swaggering fool. That's the fascist I keep seeing him as. Maybe I should call him Il Duce. Yeah, or Il Ducky. Yeah. Yeah, he is more of a Mussolini than a Franco or a Hitler. I agree. At least, certainly physically he is, yeah. Mussolini seems to be the dictator he is emulating most in his mannerisms and his physicality. All right, I'm scrolling through the chat to find a few more questions. We're almost done, but I want to find at least one or two more that I can... here's a super chat that I missed from Azrael Knight. Thank you for the super chat. And it says, pineapple on pizza? My subscription depends on it. Oh, God, this is pressure. I hope that this is the answer you want because I would love to keep your subscription, but I have no problem at all with pineapple on pizza. I actually think pineapple on pizza is really good. So judge me accordingly. I place myself in your hands. I have no problem at all with pineapple on pizza, and actually, I kind of dig it. Okay. Oh, that's the right. Oh, that's the right answer, Azrael. Awesome. I'm so glad. That's the right answer. I'm glad that we can stay friends. Okay, one more question. Maybe one or two more. I saw a couple of interesting ones just pop up. Okay, Jojo says Star Trek versus Star Wars and why. I pick Star Trek because it's just my favorite thing. It's one of my favorite things since I was a little kid, and I relate to it more. I just think the style and the viewpoint of Star Trek is more to my liking than Star Wars. But I mean, you don't have to choose. I love Star Wars too. I think Star Wars is awesome. But if I have to pick, I pick Star Trek. And Skywise 8, what's your opinion on Armored Skeptic and Shoe on Head? I think they're pieces of shit. Fuck them. That's what I think. I think they're fucking garbage people, and I have absolutely no good things to say about any of them, and I can't think of anything that could happen to them that would make me feel sorry for them. So no, they're both horrible people, and they can go to hell. If people put pineapple on baked ham, why is pizza a problem? Exactly, Rana King. Thank you. Pineapple on pizza, pineapple on ham. Neither one is more intuitive than the other. Just put pineapple on whatever the hell you want. If you like the taste of pineapple, mix it, try it on some stuff. See how you like it. Pineapple on pizza from Papa John's is something I can't get behind. But pineapple on good pizza? Wonderful. I love it. Okay. Adam says put pineapple on yayo. I have no idea. I've as you know, I am not a connoisseur of yayo, so I don't know if pineapples would make it better or not. Okay, that's it. I'm gonna call the festivities to a close. Thank you so much for all the questions, whether you are a patron and you submitted a question beforehand or you're with me here in the live chat and you were asking a question just now. I'm sorry if I missed your question. It's completely my fault. The chat goes by fast and I can't keep up with it all the time. So if you posted a question and I missed it, that's completely on me. It's nothing personal. Don't feel like you had a bad question or anything. I just see one more super chat from John Burns. So will you do a video about the trial of Robert E. Lee and would you play Lee? I'm curious how this would go in a Legal Eagle video. I have no idea. I haven't really given it much thought. It's an interesting idea. It's an interesting concept to do a video about the trial of Robert E. Lee. I might consider it, and if I did decide to go all philosophy tube on it, yeah, maybe I would play Robert E. Lee. That would be a lot of fun, actually. And if I do that, I will be sure to give you credit for giving me the idea. So, I'm going to wrap this up. As some random geek just said, I want to remind everybody of my monthly Patreon hangout that is happening this Sunday starting at 12 noon, where I will be on the air with a bunch of my Patreon patrons in a Google Hangout for an hour. It's a ton of fun that we do once a month, and this Sunday is the one for this month, so check it out. And speaking of Patreon, there's my Patreon link right there. If you enjoy what I do on this channel, and you can afford it, you think I'm worth it, you want to help me out and help me to continue to do it, you can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives. And one of the benefits is that you get to ask questions for Ask Away early. And I try to answer every patron question that I get, that I receive before the show starts anyway. Patreon.com/Steve Shives. Become a patron of the channel. I also want to remind you that in addition to the YouTube thing, I also am the co-host of a couple of podcasts as a part of the Lemmy Listen family of podcasts. I'm the co-host of Late Seating, which is a movie review podcast, and I'm also the co-host of the Ensign's Log. And the host of both of those shows and the creator and the genius behind them and the reason that they're good is the wonderful, brilliant, hilarious Jason Harding. So you can listen to Jason and me on both of those shows. There was a new episode of Late Seating that went up last week where we reviewed Dune, and there's a new episode of Ensign's Log that went up just today, and I believe that was our version of God damn it, I can't remember the Star Trek episode that we are taking off this week. It's completely left my mind, but it's a really good episode. and our Ensign's Log episode is really, really awesome. So listen to the Ensign's Log if you have not listened to it before, especially if you really like the Star Trek stuff. So that's it, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for being here in the chat. If you were here, thank you some random geek for posting links to shit. I see. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks for joining me. And I will see you in 2 weeks to do this all over again. Take care, everybody.